In case you couldn't tell by the title, this is a re-upload. The last one I uploaded was uploaded at 1 o'clock, and it was quite honestly a complete mess. So I spruced this one up a little bit, fixed that one issue, and I hope this one is better. Sorry about the delay. The old video is still up for view, however it is currently unlisted. Okay, now that IDW Sonic number 3 is out, here's my review of it. I don't know what else I can say. Other than that it starts in another town. So every comic starts with Sonic running towards a town, and then another threat comes back up. I have no idea why it has to be this formulaic, but let's continue. So Knuckles has already finished off a good chunk of the robots outside of the town. However, there's this mistake where he goes pew, or peh, and I believe it's supposed to be him saying phew, but, you know, considering Ian's history with spelling and grammar, I wouldn't be shocked if it was a mistake that got looked over by the editor. They then ask the villagers to let them in. However, it won't happen by the hairs of their chinny chin chins, or chin chin for those of you who are Japanese. However, they can't say who they're being held hostage by. However, the audience already knows that it's Nadiki and Kreka. So then they decide to jump over the wall.
You Mongolian!
The citizens begin to panic when Sonic and Knuckles come into the town. And then Mutski explains to them that they had to give up their weapons in exchange for these two guys to defend them. I'm not sure if this is supposed to be a pro-gun message or not, but considering the fact that we're talking about Ian Flynn, I don't think he's intelligent enough to really make an argument for that. Furthermore, why would they just give up all their guns to these two guys so they have no idea if they're allied with Eggman or not? It doesn't make any sense. And how are they able to take over the town to begin with? I mean, there's just two of them. But then the robots came in. Then how did the citizens know they were not allied with Eggman? Again, we don't know. It's not explained. And then Mutski points them into the exact direction, and this is where things start to get really crappy. Or crappier than they already were. While in the warehouse, they move between talking, whispering, and yelling. Nice going, idiots. And I'm surprised that Rough and Tumble didn't hear this, despite being in the same warehouse in the same room. Honestly, why they're even in the warehouse to drink, I don't know. I honestly have no idea why the comic is doing what it's doing, but it's doing these things and it's just kind of stupid. I mean, the boxes aren't even blocking the sound, it's just, how did they not notice this? So they decide to wait for Sleet and Dingo's servants to leave the room so they don't get hurt, only to immediately call attention to them while the servants are leaving the room. Honestly, I don't know why this issue is here, but it's here, and it's a huge issue. Also, one of the ha-ha boxes looks like it's coming from Knuckles. I don't get why, just roll with it. It'll all be over soon. And so, not Sleet and Dingo introduce themselves as Rough and Tumble in a similar manner to that of Team Rocket.
Prepare for trouble!
Make it double!
Then there's this joke about salt of the earth. I don't know what's so funny about their names. It's just, I don't know why. But then there's a mildly entertaining fight scene, and compared to the other fight scenes, this one's actually much better. Which is inexcusable for an action comic. You should never have an action comic where most of the fight scenes are bad. That's just poor writing. Then there's a fart joke, and then they decide to actually grab the Wispins that they've been hoarding. Only for Sonic to make an inspirational speech telling them to rise up against their masters. Okay, you did that in Spark of Life. Why did you do that again? That is just... oh god. There was no climax. That was just, again, anticlimactic. Stop with that. That's just stupid. So Mutski tells them thank you, and then Rough and Tumble are taken to jail. But they vowed to get their revenge.
John Freeman yelled at the top of lungs.
And then it ends on a party.
Who's playing that music? And where's all that liquor coming from?
It's a party, Marge. Doesn't have to make sense.
But we cut back to the chamber of this most likely Eggman villain. I'm serious. If this is Eggman, just fuck this comic. And I think they're doing something where each environment is different to give some kind of vibe for the setting, I suppose. Like, my guess is that the reason for why all of these chairs are different in terms of their appearance is because they're supposed to be a different base, but that's the best I can come up with for that. What are my ultimate thoughts on this comic? It's boring. Boring. There's nothing of interest here except for some crappy action scenes and more crappy storylines. It's not like with the second issue where it's just trying to piss me off. This is just, it's just boring. Like the first issue with some very big issues that just make it annoying as well. Also, I get the feeling that the one with the tail bitten off, I get the feeling that he was a cellmate of Jeffrey Dahmer at one point. Although the biggest elephant in the room is that Rough and Tumble have no differences between Sleet and Dingo. There's just very little differentiating from the two groups, except maybe their powers and their species, but that's not really big enough to make a good differentiation between the two. It'd be like if I was to give Sally pink hair and the color of a different character, or if I was to create a purple recolor of Sonic the Hedgehog called Zack the Hedgehog. It's just lazy. Honestly, it would have been much better if they had just used Scratch and Grounder. And I know why they didn't use Scratch and Grounder or Sleet and Dingo for this, is because Ian is dead keen on killing off the American continuity in any possible way he can, except for what Sega of America approves. Although the Freedom Fighters themselves did appear in Sonic Spinball, he doesn't really like to count that. And I'm not sure if Eggman's Mean Beam Machine would count either, but I think that's why Rough and Tumble were easily the worst part of this issue, is because they take influences... Actually, no, they don't even take influences from. They directly rip off previous characters. Because we already have two characters with the same personalities. And we already had a duo who were meant to hunt Sonic, but we just ignored them. Honestly, more people know about Scratch and Grounder than they do about Orbot and Cubot. And I just hate Orbot and Cubot because they're an attempt at capturing Scratch and Grounder's appeal, but they fail miserably, and the same, I think, can be said about Rough and Tumble. They just don't need to exist. Their existence is just pointless. You know, I would have really loved to see an issue where Scratch and Grounder actually return. And I know, Sleet and Dingo are more of an inspiration for Rough and Tumble. But Scratch and Grounder are the original duo who chase around Sonic, and I think they are the most entertaining out of all of them. As people are going to say, well, Scratch and Grounder aren't canon to the games. Well, they were the original duo. In fact, they probably had more influences than any of the other characters from the American canon. And like it or not, Sega of America liked the idea. They didn't like the characters because they don't really know any better, but they liked the idea. Although the execution of said idea was much better in Adventures and Underground, because Scratch, Grounder, Sleet, and Dingo are much more interesting characters than Orbot, Cubot, Rough, and Tumble. They just are. They have more energy, they are more interesting, they are more original. Things like YouTube Poop, Scratch, and Grounder are easily one of the most recognizable Sonic characters out there. And if they were included in this comic, I think it wouldn't have been much better, but it would have been much more entertaining to see them react to a game Sonic. That would have been far more entertaining than what we got here. What we got here is just Sleet and Dingo, but much worse. I'm sorry, I hate Sleet and Dingo. There's no purpose. There's no purpose to these characters. And you know, the predictions weren't wrong. They are just Sleet and Dingo. And you know, I usually like duos like this, but Rough and Tumble have no interesting dynamic, no interesting anything, other than that they're just skunks. It's just so creatively bankrupt. And what's worse is that this could have easily been avoided if they had just used the characters they already had, which already fit the description. But, again, Ian has this weird agenda. And he is desperate to push it because he is too busy sucking up to Sega of Japan, despite the fact that Sega of Japan wanted him to show some level of creativity, and the fact that he was also very well known for putting fan service into his books. However, this isn't really fan service so much as it is just trying to throw away something that people liked and replacing it with an inferior variant. The action sequences are just so bad. There's just wasted potential through and through. We could have had an interesting fight scene where we have Rough and Tumble fighting Sonic with Wispins, but no, we don't even get that. Instead, they just pop out in such a lazy manner that it just says screw you to anyone who thought this would be a good action comic. It's quite honestly the lowest point of an action comic when the action sequences just don't work, they don't flow, they have wasted potential. And instead of doing something interesting with it, it just haphazardly slaps it together, and it's just not finished. It is missing something that it can stand on. And when an interesting action scene is cut off specifically by some kind of dumbass Deus Ex Machina, I'm sorry, that doesn't cut it. You can't have an action scene where the heroes are never in any trouble. They're in some harm here, but that's not enough to justify the action comic title that this thing is trying to uphold. It wants to be an action comic, but every action scene so far has just been really, really crappy, and they've been really poorly choreographed. And the art here is not particularly great. It's about on par, if not slightly worse, at least from my standpoint, than what happened with Tracy Yardley. Although I mostly attribute the bad art in this issue to the fact that it's being written by Ellen DeGenerate's girlfriend, Jennifer Hernandez, who is too busy complaining about why people are sexist and mean and homophobic because they don't like Sally X Nicole. Also, a special shout out to Zeke Lott for pointing this out, but apparently Hernandez also put in her Sonic OC. I'm surprised Zeke the Hedgehog isn't anywhere in this, but, you know, I'm not really surprised at that, considering how Ian has been blocking people on Twitter for even mentioning that character, which is just a purple recolor of Sonic the Hedgehog. Tune in next week as we ruin Blaze the Cat.